Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and glad to be doing today's Lightforge. We got a lot of stuff that we're hoping we can cover in a very short amount of time.
What is happening? What's happening today?
Well, if you guys didn't know, on Friday they had the big card dump, the big card reveal, and now we know every single card that will come out, all 135 cards for Journey to Ungoro, which...
Every card, wow.
Yeah,
So,
every single card.
So now we basically know the entire Ongoro meta, and there's no need to play the next 3 months of the arena, right?
Basically, no. Why play it when you can analyze it? That's the ADWCTA method.
I mean, that's my game. I don't know what you guys play. That's how I play the arena.
Right. Well, all of us are playing the game, and you're playing like the game within the game, right?
The game outside of the game.
The game outside of the game, which is the purest game that you can play.
Yeah, it's the metagame of the metagame.
But before we go into that, before we dive into Ongoro, all right, I just want to say goodbye and good riddance to 7.1 meta.
Oh my god,
right?
7.1.
7.1 meta in which you didn't really have to experience it.
No,
Like,
I played cool classes. I
Right.
played 7.1 the way Blizzard wanted you to play 7.1, okay? None of this leaderboard stuff. Just like get a deck, start throwing things around, click, drag. That's how Hearthstone's meant to be played.
Right. But for those of you who have been playing this past week, so I've been playing a ton this past week. Unfortunately, because I had to finish like my last, I don't know, like 10-ish runs on, I think it was more than 10-ish runs on the leaderboard, right? So I was like, oh, all right, I have to stream. I just did everything. And this past week for me has been miserable because we are past the honeymoon phase of like, cool, like new offering rates, new stuff, right? For 7.1. And I have just had the most miserable of time. Like, this is just obviously my own personal opinion, but
No,
I believe
it's a widely shared opinion. It's
Well,
not
I
everyone, but I feel like among arena vets, it's got to be at least 60-70%.
it's pretty bad. And I've talked with Shady, and Shady is basically like his statement. I think is just very true. It's like he's like, when I win, it feels undeserved, and when I lose, it just feels absolutely terrible, right? Like the way that you lose. Yeah, I mean, my win rate has also plummeted in the past week, which kind of makes sense just because the new players are gone, right? Like
Yes,
any new players.
and we said that. We said that
yeah.
right when 7.1 came out. We were like, you could go back to the Lightforge and look at it. Like, exactly. It's like, well, a ton of players are going to come to the arena. It's going to feel okay because you're still going to win a lot. But this, like, actual meta does not allow skill to matter at anywhere near the way it mattered before. And so, therefore, when the new players start going away, and this is a good time when, like, new players go away, because, like, the new meta's coming, right? Like, this is not
Right.
the week to be playing Arena or, like, anything, really. This is not the week to be playing Hearthstone.
Right.
So...
If anything, there is significantly less casual players than normal because they're saving the gold.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so... This is going to bring out what 7.1 really is, the true nature of 7.1, outside of the first month of not even a month, it's usually just like 2-3 weeks of the newness, right, and the bad players being around. This is what 7.1 is, and at its core, 7.1 is I'm going to say answer and response meta again. It's a threat and response meta, and what that means is whoever has the most threats and the most responses wins. Like 90% of the time. And that is not skill. That is not even drafting skill. It's really easy to draft threats, and it's really easy to draft responses. They are usually the best cards.
Right, definitely. And, we've had previously sort of, quote, bad metas, right? Like GVG was a little bit bad, but I think part of that was just people weren't used to it. Karazhan meta was pretty
GVG
bad.
was actually bad, though, because it went too much the other way. It became
Right.
whoever has the most 2-drops, which arguably is even less fun than a threat and response. At least with threat and response, you play big, cool cards.
Sure. Or you just play Priest and they play nothing and then they just respond. We also had the Karazhan meta, but at the same time, it was mostly just mages bringing everyone down, right?
Yeah, I didn't mind the Karazhan meta. There were good ways to beat mages. I don't know. I think people were just like not good enough at like knowing exactly what to do against a mage that they felt really oppressed by it. What is skill? Skill is figuring out what to do against something and being able to react to stuff, right? Like, if you take away Fireland's Portal, yes, it makes the game more balanced, and you need to do that, but it does take away the skill of playing around Fireland's Portal, which it affects drafting very heavily, and it affects gameplay really heavily. And you know how you get rid of that? By giving everybody a ton of threats and responses. And so now it doesn't matter if they play Fireland's Portal, because you'll respond with your own threat, and they'll respond and blah, 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 blah. Right? Rather than you just lose, or they just lose.
So, it's been pretty bad. And we've seen, like, on the Arena HS subreddit, like, there have been so many posts during the past like week or two saying just like, I don't enjoy the meta. It's like, this is just terrible. And it's been capped off with I think Crypt's video from yesterday.
Crypt's on board now, because it took a while for Crypt to like get on board with the whole 7.1 sucks thing, because you know, you don't feel it as much in the early going if you're like playing, but I think he's seen his average go down. He's realized that his average is not going down because he's become a worse player. It's like it's just this is where we're at right now, and it's good to have Crip on board with what we and a lot of other Arena veterans have been saying for a while now, since 7.1's come out. Because like, you talk to Blizzard, right? Like, XR responds to our tweets, and he responds on Reddit. He's just a really like nice and responsive guy, and he thinks everything's going swell, right? Like, not perfect, nothing's perfect. There's definitely room for improvement, caveated, but generally, like, 7.1, huge success, overwhelming positive response. And we are just one voice, and frankly we're like a kind of a small and niche kind of voice of people who are insanely into the arena and make everything mathematical and have numbers and tier lists and whatever. And I think that they think that Crip is more of like just a good arena player that's not necessarily mathing everything out, but is like looking for ways to enjoy the arena and really knows what he's doing in there and has a huge freaking audience. So having him on board definitely helps a ton. And I think it's time that Blizzard really, because they haven't even admitted it yet, right? The first step to recovery is knowing you have a problem. They don't think they have a problem. They don't think 7.1 is a problem at all. I think they're probably scratching their heads like, what are the GOAT people talking about? Like, everybody loves this. They're just not used to it. We haven't been bitching about 7.1 meta because we're not used to it, or because we're nostalgic about the old ways. We've been bitching about it because it legitimately reduces skill. And so it hurts every single player who's trying to play the game to win. Like, it's all
if you're just a weekend player, fine. If you're playing it just for the goals, you will get more goals out of this. But it hurts Arena in a competitive aspect, and it hurts the future of Arena, which is something we both of us care about.
And especially when they're tweaking Arena, they can make this so good, and they've chosen to make it so much more casual. Like, you gotta find a middle ground. I'm not saying, the Arena has to be the most skill-intensive game and no one can have fun. I would prefer that, but I understand we're not gonna get there. But we're going way too far in the other direction right now. Like I said, right, it's making it more constructed-like. It's making it too constructed-like right now, without the ability for you to construct your actual deck. The skill in constructed is constructing your deck, because once you start playing, your win rate's not going to be hugely disproportionate if you're like, not countering the deck, right? Like, if you just have like evenly matched kind of deck-wise, like, your gameplay is only going to matter so much. In Arena, your gameplay mattered a ton, and now it matters like a little bit more than in constructed, which is not right, because you're taking away the other skill in constructed, or what should be the skill, which is tweaking your deck and making a new deck, maybe even, right? Like, that's where the huge skill in constructed comes from. And so now Arena's like missing everything. It's a bad feeling if you care about winning. Which is why I didn't care about winning this month. Didn't go for the leaderboard. Said it in the very beginning. Just playing bad classes. Lots of like warrior. I wanted to play lots of druid, which we're gonna play later today, actually. Look, it's not terribly unfun if you don't care about winning, right? 7.1 compared to before. Like, it's fine. If you care about winning, it's endlessly frustrating.
Yes. Because of the way that you lose, and also the decks that you see at like 1-1, right? Or even like 2-2 or 1-2. I've had to like barely claw my way to 2-2 from 1-2 way too many times this past week. And it's just because like deck quality really shines through now.
Yeah, and if you're wondering how to fix it, there's so many easy ways to fix it. We've tweeted it, like XR knows, right? The Blizzard dev team knows not exactly how to fix it, but pretty much the general things to do to fix this kind of stuff. Because they caused the problem with the offering odds changes in 7.1. Like, there was no problem. Everybody, like, the worst part is that everybody thought the MSG meta was the best arena meta ever, right? Like, before 7.1, almost everybody was in agreement that the arena meta had never been better ever. And then Blizzard came in and started tweaking stuff, and they made it so much worse. Which is fine as a short-term thing, right? That's my position on this always. It's fine as a short-term thing, but they really got to get their act together. And I'm really disliking the attitude they have over there right now, which is that, oh, everybody seems fine. Like, it's not fine. And I don't want to be elitist about it. I mean, I do want to be elitist about it, I should say. But, like, we know what's going on because we've analyzed it deeper than other people. And when the gloss comes off, when this newness wears off, when the player base returns to a stable, like, rate, all this is going to show through. And it has shown through. And it's gotten to the point where Crip's sounding the alarm bells too. Like,
right. And Crip's message was just like, in the past week, he's like, it has just been insane. He's like, basically he said he has not been infinite in the past week. He doesn't know how.
Look, if Crip is not infinite, you have a problem. Like, as a game designer,
either in this past week.
You're not infinite the past week? Oh, wow.
Nope.
Yeah, like,
not the
you
past
have
week.
a problem. Like,
Just
flat
the past
out,
week.
you have a problem.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a game designer and you had an arena, which one of the key draws was that you can become an infinite player, and the top players in the arena are telling you, we are not able to be infinite anymore.
Right.
Like,
although, like, see, here's the problem. Like, Blizzard can probably look at the leaderboard and be like, dude, like, some people have insane averages. Like I don't understand, like, what these people, like, oh, Merps, like, I don't know what he's complaining about. Get good. I would like to see, it's like, how many of those people, like, what percentage of their runs, if they're averaging like 8.2, 8.5, 8.7, what percent of those were at the end of the month, right?
Right.
And it sounds like this is just me being salty and like,
so how much did
stuff.
you lower your leaderboard win rate in the last week?
A whole one average.
Really?
Like,
well, what'd you end at?
I ended at 7.3.
So you were at 8.3 before the last week? Like 7 days ago? Or I guess
I was
like
at
9 days ago?
No, sorry. So even before that, it was...
Because it slowly gets worse. It's not like, you know,
right,
a switch flicked. It just...
No. It wasn't that. I think I was at like... high sevens. So before my co-op runs with Shady, which we unfortunately got like double twos, I was at like 8.3. So I forgot when I did the co-op with Shady. Okay. I think that was still a little bit in like the middle of the month.
Right. Okay. Yeah, but in the last week, you still dropped like half a point on a basis of like, 20 something runs already. So it's pretty major. Yeah. Okay. So let's move off of that and the negativity because Blizzard is moving off of that because guess what? 7.1 is over. I mean, we're going to come into the sad realization that Un'Goro is going to be still built on 7.1, right? Like, we have confirmed with Ixar. He's tweeted it. They're not changing the offering odds, at least not in the beginning. He's saying they probably will, later on. So before the next expansion comes out sometime, there will be another offering, like, odds kind of adjustment, which will shake up the meta again, which is welcome. But at least Un'Goro is launching with 7.1 offering odd rules. And so we'll talk about the implications of that. But just so you know, it's not really going away, but it's going to be different. Just because, right, huge meta shifts. Speaking of huge meta shifts, Un'Goro cards, what everyone's actually listening to this podcast to hear about, not us ranting about 7.1. Let's look to the future. Next week, Un'Goro. What's going on there, man?
Wow. Damn, that's a very general question for you to be asking.
Yeah,
what is going on with Un'Goro?
I hear there's something with dinosaurs.
There is stuff going on with dinosaurs. There's stuff going on with adaptations, right? So dinosaurs isn't exactly a theme. It's not like we have a dinosaur tribe. But Un'Goro is about adaptations in which you get to choose one of 3 stat selections to either give to the minion that you just played, or sometimes you can adapt other minions on the board, right? So that's a theme. Elementals, that is a theme. They are a new tribe that, they introduced new elementals, and they also sort of retconned and added the elemental tag to like Magma Rager, and the other stuff doesn't matter. It's Magma Rager. So it's about those and What am I
quests,
missing?
which we don't have.
You're right. We're
We
talking
ignore
about
quests.
arena
We're
now.
talking about arena. Quests don't exist in
Yeah.
arena. If you're wondering, you see those cool quest cards. They're not in the arena. Don't worry about them.
No, it's fine. So, Ungoro has introduced those, but I think big picture and one of the big picture themes that we're going to see is oh my god, this expansion is ridiculous. It is so powerful.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It is hugely, hugely powerful.
Because some people are calling it power creep. I'm like, no, no, no. Power creep is slow. Number one, it's slow and steady, and number two, it is an incremental sort of step up on what we had before. No, this is like they were taking an expansion from another game and putting it into
Okay, it's not that bad. Look, I have the opposite view, I think, as you do when it comes to the power. Okay, power creep means we originally had 1 mana 2 1s, and now we have 1 mana 2 2s, and then we have 1 mana 2 3s, and then we have 1 mana 3 3s. That's a power creep. This is not power creeping. This is not power creeping because, and we'll show. Like we valued all the cards already, except one because I got lazy with it, and it needs a whole new system, and it's one legendary card, and I don't care about it. But all the other cards have been valued, and I can tell you right now, there is no top-line power creep overall. Which sounds crazy, because you're going to see some really powerful cards. But what I mean is, the very best cards in the game are still the very best cards in the game. Now, there is now a whole lot more very best cards in the game, but there's no creep on it. The top power level has not been increased overall in the game.
We've just increased the number of what we've known as sort of like 80th or 90th percentile cards.
Exactly, like hugely. Normally when an expansion comes out, especially a large expansion, you get a lot of really bad cards and like combo-y cards, and you have, you know, some really good cards, and you have a whole bunch of cards in the middle. Here, you just have a lot of really good cards, a huge number of premium cards, and not a lot of bad and combo-y cards. And so one of the big things that's happening, and this is the same thing with OG, but this is like even better than OG. It's, I think the very first expansion of every year from now on is going to be a base expansion that's going to anchor the whole entire year. So they're not crazy like mechanics going on here. There's a lot of very normal-ish, like raw stat-based, raw power kind of cards. And that's what's good in the arena. So like Ungoro really set the tone here for what we're going to see in the Mammoth era. For this rotation. Like, just, these are very powerful cards. The meta is changing. But there's no actual power creep overall. Now, I'm going to immediately kind of take half of that back, which is, let's talk about how the meta is shaped in Ungoro, right? Like, the meta is always shaped by, like, the best cards, right? Like, the first question that you want to ask is, what are the best cards? And so the best cards, especially the neutral cards that every class has, that is what's going to set the meta. So what are the best cards? I think what we're going to do, and you may be expecting like a 3-hour Lightforge like we did for 7.1 or whatever, we're actually making like a 4 or 5 hour video series, if not 10 hours. Hopefully it won't go that long. But it's going to be a really long video series.
I need sleep tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. When we get some more things set up, and that'll be when we do a deep dive on it. So for now, we're just gonna do a couple of cards, tell you what the best stuff is, and kind of like, you know, talk a little about the meta. It's gonna be an overview kind of thing. But when you want to go deep, you're gonna go on our YouTube and you're going to look at all of those, and that's going to be releasing starting on Tuesday on like a rolling basis. So like before the expansion comes out on Thursday, by the way. So before Thursday is the 6th. So before the 6th, on the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th, we're going to roll out our deep analysis. But yeah, so what is the number one card, the number one neutral? And we know that commons or rares are the same now. So what is the number one neutral, common, or rare card?
All right, guys. So, like, we've had metas that have been defined by like Krakens and Bog Creepers, right? These gigantic value monsters that have shaped the meta. Now we welcome the stubborn gastropod meta.
we are now in the stubborn gastropod meta.
Oh god,
this is happening in the mighty world of dinosaurs. The meta defining card is a snail.
Yes, we've had bog creepers, we've had krakens. Now all bow down to the mighty snail, man. Stubborn gastropod is obviously, a common neutral card, 2 mana, 1/2 taunt with poisonous.
And it's a beast.
And it's a beast. Not insignificant. Man, Hemet is really crying about the fact that, it can't do anything about, well, new Hemet's here, but whatever. Anyways, kind of easy to see why this thing is so good, right? So what makes a card good? Playability. You can play this at any time. The fact that it's an Emperor Cobra, right? Like it has the Emperor Cobra or Pit Snake ability. It kills anything. And the taunt makes it so that if they have a big minion, they can't get a value trade before you hit in with this. And because this expansion, and it'll be one of the themes, doesn't introduce a lot of removals.
No, there's like almost no removals introduced.
There's basically no removals introduced, but it does introduce tons of big stuff.
Lots of big stuff.
Right, lots of big stuff. So they dropped their 6 mana 8/8 or something, which we'll talk about later. And you drop this Gastropod. They look at their hand. They're just like, I have more 6 mana 8/8s.
And not only can you drop the Gastropod, you can also drop a bunch of stuff behind the Gastropod, right? Like your mid-sized minions or whatever, and they're safe. Your opponent either has to use a removal to remove a 2-drop, right? That's not a good, that's really, unless you're doing a mass removal, right? Mass removal, deal 2 damage to everything, that's fine, that's good value. But other than that, it's bad value for your opponent no matter what they do to this thing.
Yeah.
With one exception. There's one particular opponent can do to this thing.
Oh God, no. Look, they don't have the offering bonus, all right?
Oh yeah, it's over? No more Potion of Madness?
I mean, God, this is what I'm always gonna hate Priest forever. Before, in previous metas, at least I felt bad because they could do some stuff, but it was still awkward, right? It's they either Holy Nova or Excavated Evil. I'm like, oh, just play around that. They didn't have this Potion of Madness stuff. They didn't have the silences they have now and the Dragonfire potions. You know what? No sympathy for Priest.
Okay.
Go away. Anyway.
So just Potion of Madness is going to get a lot more powerful because this is the Kraken. This is the Bog Creeper. This is the best card. Definitely the best card of this meta. And I'm looking at chat and I see some people try to pimp the Giant Wasp as being better or even on par. It's not even close. I know, people are like, oh, but it's stealth. You can pick the target that you hit. Yeah, but it's not taunt. It removes your ability to actually play onto the board stuff. That's huge. You lose so much mana with it. It's not on the same level as the Stubborn Gastropod. And if you're wondering, we'll talk about the Giant Wasp later too, because it's a good card. But if you're wondering what the Giant Wasp is, it's a 3 mana 2/2 that's stealth and has poisonous. It's good.
So, one of the things that people when people sort of have their ideas about scores on the tier list, it's really, really sort of hard for people to realize just number one, how much 1 mana matters, or how much this matters. It's very easy to have, what was it? I call it the BGH effect, right? When BGH was still 3 mana, basically if any card came out that was 7 attacker or more, it's oh, BGH exists. It just, you can't play it at all, right? It's very easy to think of the easy negatives and then be like, oh, and so now this thing is a lot worse than what it should be. But this card, the fact that you can, the taunt is supremely good.
Wait, how does that connect to your previous train of thought?
You know what? It probably doesn't.
Okay, because I was trying to follow you, and I was like, I don't know where you're going with this, and then you went nowhere with it, and just went back to how good the Stubborn Gastropod is.
The big picture is basically...
Okay, I think where you're going with it, or you're trying to go with it, is that people are focusing on these big specific things and thinking about combos and thinking about power in these areas, and they're not thinking about the micro things that add up.
Yeah.
In real case use situations where that 2 mana is just much more flexible than 3 mana.
Yeah, that's exactly what
And where you really don't have enough 2-drops in the meta, and you can probably get enough things to do on turn 3. So, on top of all that, Stubborn Gastropod is in the rare place of being a 2-drop that trades up to a 3-drop or a 4-drop. It's crazy on turn 2. Just a crazy, insane, ridiculous card. And just to give you an idea of how good this card is, this is the highest rated common or rare card, neutral card, ever. This is better than a Kraken. This is better than a Bog, and significantly, not a point or two better.
Right.
This is like serious power creep, which, like I said, doesn't happen overall, but as you'll see, it is happening on the neutral level. There are a lot of neutral cards that are coming out that are way, well, not way, but like very significantly better than even the best neutral cards that have existed
Right.
before. Like
And
Stubborn Gastropod is better than Cult Master back in the MSG meta when we had Cult Master insanely high. It's better than that.
right. And it's easy sort of to see why. The other cards that we're talking about, um, if you draw Kraken on turn 3, that's like 5 turns of you not being able to do anything with it, right? This, you basically play at because the game basically begins on, well, traditionally began on turn 2. We can talk about when it begins now. But you can always play this card.
The game
It always
doesn't
has a
begin
good effect.
anymore.
Yeah,
That's
it
what's
basically
happening.
doesn't
The
begin.
game doesn't begin anymore. Like the game is now, and we'll go over this when we talk about curve, but it's a threat and response meta. And there's no concept of the game begins. The game begins on turn 1, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to go to our second best card, second best neutral card. These are, remember, the reason we're talking about these and not class cards is because they are what defines Ungoro. They will anchor the entire meta. Like, whenever you think about the game, these are the cards you have to think about because they're the ones you will see everywhere, every opponent. Second best card. Another card that's better than any card that currently exists in the neutral or rare slot. That's 2 now.
So we got in second place the Tar Creeper. Lots of I don't know, these weird sort of like what.
He's an
Anyways.
elemental made of tar.
Yeah, I guess he's an
because
elemental.
Tar is an element. I have no idea why. I don't know anything about Warcraft lore, but all the tar stuff, and there's a whole bunch of tar stuff, which is a little weird, but there's a whole bunch of tar stuff going on in Ungoro, and they're all like elementals.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Anyways, Tar Creeper is 3 mana for a 1/5 taunt, and it has +2 attack during your opponent's turn. And it's also an elemental, so it triggers
It's
elemental.
Ascension on your opponent's turn, and it's a 1/5 taunt on your turn. Or it's not even a taunt, because it's on your turn, you can't taunt.
Yeah. So, really good. A lot of stats. It's not pure upside, right? It's not pure upside because when it comes back to you, you can't trade into other stuff because it turns back into a 1/5, right? But in terms of like how it affects the board, it definitely, like, even if your opponent doesn't attack and drops something and just sort of chills, you've bought that extra time, right? You put the stats out, you bought that extra time. It's just a very, very good card.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's not. It's a good card. Everyone knows it's a good card, and it's a curve kind of card, and it's an insane curve card on 3. This would be even better if this was like, earlier. Like if this was not Ungoro and this was a different meta before 7.1. This would be like insane. But as it is, oftentimes there's not going to be like a ton of 1 or 2 drops being played. Like I'd say half the time. We'll talk about like what classes curve and what doesn't later on. But like you always have the time where someone's trying to go aggro, right? Like especially hunters, and this just stops them cold. Like they're done. And that's always very useful. We rate cards that can just stop aggro cold and get you those wins pretty highly. It's also why like Arcane Explosion and stuff is really high. All right, so the third best card. 3 cards now better than any currently existing card. These are all cards that are better than Kraken. So Kraken right now is our best card on the tier list in the current.
By the way, what we're talking about the neutrals.
Yeah,
like,
just neutrals, commons, and rares. Not even like epics.
Right. I don't want people just like, wait, this is like better than Coghammer was, or like it's like no. Like let's stick to neutrals.
Yeah, neutrals. Because like the whole premise is neutrals, right? These are anchor cards. They anchor the meta. A class card. We'll talk about class cards that anchor the meta, and then like late after this. So third card.
We got a tiny little card, but it packs a huge amount of punch. Glacial Shard.
Glacial Shard. So we have a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and a 1-drop that are all the best cards ever for neutral. Like think about where this meta is heading. Because I know everyone's like, so many big things, but think about where this meta is heading. Because your best cards are a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop.
So Glacial Shard is a 1-mana 2/1 elemental, which triggers other elementals, and it has a battle cry of freeze an enemy. So
Freeze an enemy. That was an entire card.
That was.
That was an entire card that cost no mana. That, on a Frost Elemental, cost a mana and a half.
Yep.
This thing's like getting it for free.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Blizzard has always had this philosophy, right, where small stuff can do a lot more, right? But this is like the most that I've seen for a 1 mana card, essentially. Like the freeze effect is absolutely huge. It punishes, like you said, Frost Elemental by a ton. It just doesn't make sense when you compare this with Frost Alley. But then again, welcome to Ungoro.
Yep. Welcome to Ungoro, indeed. So the thing with Glacial Shard is, like people in chat are saying, oh, it's not really a 1-drop. It kind of isn't, it kind of isn't. Like if you have it on turn 1, you're playing it. In that sense, it's a 1-drop. Unless like you're a super like control deck. But in the sense that, yeah, if at all possible, you don't play it on turn 1, that's true. But it's the same with Stubborn Gastropod. If at all possible, you don't want to play that thing on turn 2. If you have another 2-drop, you play the other 2-drop. The Stubborn Gastropod will get way more value later, right? It's like Cobra. You don't really want to play it on turn 3, but you're cool with it on turn 3. It's like, these are all this kind of stuff. Tar Creeper, on the other hand, you want to play it on turn 3. That is its best like use case scenario. But yes. So what do these 3 cards have in common? Besides that, they are all better than any currently existing neutral or rare card. And I don't just mean in the next rotation. I include all cards in the current rotation that's going out. They are also all taunts. All 3 of them.
Yep.
You have 2 that are taunts and 1 that freezes, which is essentially a taunt on 1 minion. Not even a taunt, it like freezes it cold. So, sort of a taunt. So there are 3 cards that are just purely designed to slow the game down, but they're low mana cards. That's the theme of Ungoro. That right there is what Ungoro is about. It's about introducing a lot of these low mana cards, which remember Blizzard have been removing from the arena because they're getting rid of our curve. But just because Blizzard's getting rid of our curve does not mean that Blizzard wants to get rid of low mana cards. And so here are some cards that are pretty good on curve, but more importantly, they're really good off curve too.
Right. This is something that we're going to see with a lot of the class cards as well. They've thought about it, and it's like, well, like how do we want like to define this, right? We can make like super powerful like low drops, but we've done that before and we don't like it. They're like, let's introduce value to these low drops that sort of you can play on curve, but they can also get value, and you can do some tricky things with them later on as well, right? So it's not just like Raptors in which like they have all of their value on turn 2, and then on like turn 6 and turn 7,
you have a Raptor.
They're terrible. Yeah, they're pretty terrible. Gastropod is probably even better later on, but you're still happy playing on turn 2. It'll kill anything, right?
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, so it's really interesting how we see, we have all these big drops and we have all these little drops that, in a sort of dinosaur meta, like the Raptors are just,
well, because you know what's going to happen. The big stuff are all going to die, and this little stuff is what's going to live. The tar is going to live, the snail's going to live, glacial shards are going to live for a bit longer. They're going to go away now, and humans are going to really make them go away. But
next expansion.
Yeah, they're here for now. This is what Ungoro's about in the arena, and it's okay. And now, like just to get this right out of the open, I am like in love with how Ungoro is moving. Like I think 7.1 the offering odds needs to be tweaked and all that stuff, but this is a really good direction to go for arena when it comes to drafting. And why? It's because when you draft these 2-drops, do you want these in aggressive decks? Yeah, you do. Of course you want these in aggressive decks. They're like amazing 1, 2, and 3 drops. But do you also want them in control decks? Yes, you do, because they're taunts, and they have more value when you play them later on too. So you're not faced with the decision to take like 7 Raptors and make an aggro deck, or to take 5 Raptors, or maybe even 4 Raptors, and then you have a control deck. Like, you're not limited by those. You just take a bunch of 2-drops, or 3-drops, or 1-drops, or whatever, and then you see where your deck goes from there. It creates more ability for your draft to matter, and it creates more ability for your gameplay to matter. These are very high skill cards, when viewed not like by themselves, but like when viewed in the context of deck building, they make drafting more difficult because they make drafting more open. Of course, when you see these cards, you just take them. So in that sense, they make that pick very easy, but they make the rest of your draft more difficult. In a good way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I picked two more cards to add on here. The fourth and the fifth best one. There's kind of a drop after a Glacial Shard, but I think these are interesting enough to be included.
These are interesting cards, and I hate going down this list because people the rest of the cards are like very close. Like,
well, there's still these two cards still stand above the rest, and then we're gonna go into a couple more cards that I'm just gonna kind of punch through and make a like theme it, but like those are a step below. So these next two cards are, we'll say, at the next tier, right? Like the next card is worse than a Kraken. I'll tell you that right now. It's the first card we talked about that's worse than a Kraken.
Anyways, we got Frozen Crusher. It's a new 6-drop, 6 mana, 8/8, and whenever you attack something, it freezes itself. So significantly overstated, but it does have a drawback, right? Pretty substantial drawback, actually. It freezes itself, so then you get the first hit, like you get to hit whatever you want, but then sort of your opponent has either a turn to not deal with it, or they get to choose how they deal with it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's one of those interesting ways, because Blizzard keeps trying to find ways to get the person who's not on the board to get back on the board without making it pointless for the person on the board to have the board, right? Like, that's the entire game of Hearthstone when it comes to card design. You got to figure both of those out. And so this is one. Yeah. And so this is the way that we're going about it. And I think it's a very interesting way to do it. You put an overstated minion out so that your opponent will have problems to remove it, which means that you will probably have initiative, and then you will then be able to do stuff with it. But then it has a drawback to make up for the fact that it's so big. Like, I like this kind of design. It's like Felric Soulfiend, right? Kind of like that.
Yeah. All right, so that's the card. Our card after that is Stonehill Defender. Stonehill Defender is 3 mana. It's a rare. 3 mana, 1/4 taunt. Silverback Patriarch without the beast tag. With Battlecry, discover a taunt minion. So once again, Blizzard's philosophy of introducing a small card that's perhaps a little bit understated, that also has
this is
value
not a curve card, but
no.
It fits a theme otherwise of low mana, high good for control.
Right. And for something that's understated, you do want it to have taunt, right? Just be annoying. And you discover a taunt minion, and taunt minions are quite good, right? You can basically choose a big minion. You can choose one that's appropriate for your game, and this is just a very good value card.
Yep. As far as card draws go, like, think about what you get for 4 mana, draw a card. This is discover a card too, it's not even draw a card. But think about what you get for 4 mana. You get a 2/4. This is a 1/4 with taunt, which is like not that much worse than a 2/4, and you save a whole mana on it, and you discover something, and the thing you discover will have taunt. Like, there's a whole chain of like goodness happening here. And so it's a super powerful card. And once again, right, like another taunt card. So all these great cards all have taunt. Like, this is a taunt meta. This is a small taunt meta of high value small taunts. It's kind of interesting. I'm like actually really excited to be playing in a meta where everyone's drafting these and everyone has all these cards and it has an offering odds bonus and all that. Like, we have never seen anything like this, and it's not like an easy thing to do, right? It's not like, oh, we have big things now, or oh, the game's going faster now, or oh, we're gonna snowball now, or oh, there's gonna be a ton of removals now. That's not what's happening here. This is like a very nuanced kind of design space that they're using. And it's so nuanced that I don't think a lot of people have picked up on it. Like, they pick up on which cards are good, but I don't think anyone's like themed it yet in this way, right? Where what you're actually dealing with as a player in this new meta is going to be how to best use and how to deal with small taunts that gain value later on, but can also be used as curve. Like, it's going to be really interesting.
Yep.
Yep. Sorry, are you going to say something?
No. So these are a few of the cards that you'll see a lot, right? And we have a lot. I see the chat right now, and there's like, oh, about this card, that
Yeah, I'm,
card.
I'm gonna go through a bunch of cards right now, like the
Do it.
almost made it's.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
these guys almost made it, but they're on a level below the ones we're talking about, and I'll talk about them in terms of how they affect the curve and stuff. So first, volatile elemental. That's like if you think about the curve, right, and what kind of drops we're talking about. We'll go more into it after this, but the best 2-drop that we're getting is a volatile elemental, which is a 2-mana 1/1 with a death rattle that says deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion. Which
3.
sorry, 3 damage to a random enemy minion, which is important because unlike the toad or other stuff, it can't possibly miss and go face. The only way it
Yeah,
misses is when your opponent has no minions. Then it just doesn't do anything. But as long as your opponent has a minion, it will hit something, and it matches up against like every 3-drop. Like outside of I don't know 2/5s, right? That's the only one it doesn't match up against. So it's kind of insane when you play it on the curve, but it can be pinged away, and if your opponent doesn't have a board, it's gonna have no effect.
yeah,
And otherwise, it trays with everything, right? It won't eat something and then go on. But it's very interesting. And in prior metas, this may not have been the best 2-drop ever, and it's still not the best 2-drop ever, but it's really quite good. Like I think you guys are gonna be surprised at how high we rate volatile elemental. And the reason this is so high in this meta is because there's not guaranteed to be 2-drops. Like, decks generally go one way or the other now. You're kind of forced into it a bit in the beginning, where you're either going super aggro, in which case this is really good because it removes 2 targets.
yeah,
And your opponent probably has 1-drops, which may be 2/1s that this could remove. Like, so many good things. Or they're waiting. And so they have, like, these big things that come out later on, which means your 2-drops have a very high chance to face 3 or 4-drops. Which again, this isn't the best against a 2 or 4-drop, but it's better than any other 2-drop will do. And this is great against 3-drops. So it's in a really good place in the 7.1 meta, which is going to carry over to the Ungoro meta. But it's kind of a weird 2-drop. Super powerful, definitely a 2-drop, but a weird one. Okay, next, so another card that almost made it, Egg Napper, which again continues the trend of weirdness. It's a 3/1 with a death rattle, summon 2 1/1 raptors for 3 mana. So there's a lot of stats to it. It's like an aggressive version of a Haunted Creeper for 3 mana. Haunted Creepers are really good. This guy's really good. And more importantly, this guy counters a lot of 3/3s and 4/3s.
yeah.
And while the
By the way,
uh,
I'm gonna ask you right now because you're not doing it. Make sure you show the card before you start talking about it. All right, for our YouTube video.
fine for the YouTube video. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So the sorry, I just broke my train of thought. We were talking about okay. So the Egg Napper is a 3/1, and so it trades really well with 3/3s and 4/3s. Which is most of the 3-drop meta now. Like the 4/3 meta is going away with Ungoro coming in, but the 3/3 meta is going to be the new meta. Like there's no more 3/4s. There's a lot fewer 4/3s, but there's a ton of 3/3s. And so that's where the Egg Napper is going to shine. And again, another curve card. These are not as good as the other ones we were talking about, but they definitely set the curve. And we already talked about Giant Wasp, which falls into this category of really good cards. So like we were worried before about 3-drops going away with Ungoro and possibly shifting the curve up even more, but it doesn't seem like we need to worry about that because you have your Glacial Shard, you have your Tar Creeper, you have your Egg Napper, and you have your Giant Wasp, and they're all really good cards, and they're going to anchor down this 3-drop for all the classes. So we're fine on 3-drops. The game will still start on 3 at latest, no matter who you are. Going on, another card that almost made it at 4 mana is Fire Plume Phoenix, which is a 4 mana 3/3 battle cry, deal 2 damage, which reminds you of a Stormpike Commando, which is a 4/2 deal 2 damage. But Stormpike Commando, being a very playable arena card of average value, costs 5 mana. So this is just flat out way better. So it's a good card, but again, not a 4-drop. Usually not a 4-drop. So we have kind of a weakish spot on 2, and we have kind of a weakish spot on 4, which is interesting, because normally it's the exact opposite. You have a lot of strong 4-drops and strong 2-drops, and we'll get back into it, but get back into that later. So keep that in mind. For 5 mana, we have Nesting Row, That is by far the best 5-drop, and it's pretty much on the same level as these guys. And it is a 5-mana 4/7 with a battle cry that says if you control at least 2 other minions, gain taunt. So it'll sometimes gain taunt, but not usually. It'll gain taunt in the late game, right? That's usually what it's there for. And 5-mana 4/7 is the right amount of stats, right? Pit Fighter's leaving the meta, so it's not a 5/6, but it is a 4/7. Which splits the stats in a way that is generally more favorable to what we want. Okay, and finally, the last kind of rare or common card that makes the list are Sated Threshodon and Volcanosaur. So Sated Threshodon is a 7-mana 5/7 that summons 3 1/1 Murlocs when it dies. So nice, beefy stat stick that also has Death Rattle Prevention, right? Very good. It's 7 mana, it's a bit too much. It's a bit too costly for what it does, right? Like it doesn't have quite the massive amount of stats for what we expect out of a 7-drop, even after you factor in the 1/1 Murlocs, but it has a very good split. 5/7 is great. That is a great stat split. And at 7 mana, you don't necessarily need it to be killing 6 drops necessarily, right? So the downside prevention of having 3 1/1 Murlocs is pretty huge here, and that's why it's one of those premium cards. And Volcanosaur is a 7-mana 5/6, adapt, then adapt. So depending on what the adaptations are, it's either going to be really great or kind of okay, but overall, on average, it's going to be a pretty great card. So interestingly, right, we're focused on the 3-drop slot, not so good on the 2 or the 4. 5s are okay. We had a 6-1 or a 6-drop earlier with Frozen Crusher, so that's going to be okay as well. But we have 2 7-drops. And if you think about how many good 7-drops there are in this game right now in the neutral spots, there's Bog Creeper, and then Stormwind Champion, kind of? That's kind of it. So this is a pretty big deal. The 7 spot is going to be a real spot now, in the same way the 6 spot used to be. So the curve is getting shifted up. Remember how we hollowed out the 2? 2-drops are now very iffy. It depends on what kind of deck you're building rather than a guarantee. But 3-drops are where the game begins now. And what Blizzard's done in the arena is shifted everything back so that 7-drops are now a real thing rather than not really a thing. So they really just shifted the game back 1 turn. So for everyone thinking Curvestone's totally dead, it's not. Curvestone just starts a bit later, and there's a bit more rock paper scissors-y things going on with aggro versus control, because aggro can get a faster start now than they used to be able to relative to what control decks are doing. So it's a little more rock paper scissors-y, but it's not like Curvestone's totally dead. So those are the good cards. Those are the ones that I wanted to point your attention at. And they're going to be the cards that define the meta, and it's going to be interesting. Some really good cards here, right? It's not usual. If you remember MSG when we talked about neutral cards, it was just a whole bunch of, I guess these are better than average, right? There was 6 or 7 of those cards, and here we have this is 10 cards that we talked about now, maybe even more, that are just pure premium cards that you will always be happy to see and take. These are not Daring Reporter level cards. These are top level cards. I don't know. I'm gonna try to find, these are, I don't know, higher gun Evo Heckler type, top of the meta kind of cards. All of these.
See, those aren't great examples. I feel because a lot of listeners would just be like, dude, hired gun isn't good, right?
Yeah, but they're wrong.
I mean, I agree. Hired Gun is a incredibly good card, but those aren't the sexy cards that are that people usually think about. But anyways,
what are the sexy good drops that people think about?
I have no idea.
They don't exist. Drops aren't sexy.
Drops are not sexy.
That's the thing. And here you have
sexy,
right, but that's not a drop. So here you have a whole bunch of stuff, most of which can function as drops. And they're just way better than what we are normally used to seeing, or they're equivalent to the top line of what we had seen before.
Right. I guess really the bottom line is that what people consider sexy in Hearthstone differs from person to person. Just okay, I'll stop. Okay. Anyways, let's move on. So those are definitely the cards that you will see very often. Also, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were going, but you got a name wrong. I mean, very highly unlikely, right?
Which name? I only got one name wrong. Is
Oh,
that
you
a
might have gotten the other
record?
one wrong. But with this one, you spelled it wrong and you pronounced it wrong. It's
Oh.
nesting rock, not nesting row.
Oh.
Whatever. I think you just.
No,
I don't
I'm
know
I'm
how.
oh rock. Oh, okay, this the E. It's the rock ROC. I read as ROE because of how it looks on the card. They look very
No.
similar.
Okay,
It's a
sure.
lowercase and very
Right,
bubbly
right.
kind of
Yeah,
font.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure anyone could have made that mistake. Okay.
It's a
Anyways.
bird, by the way, so we know Blizzard's gonna nerf it a year down the line.
Fantastic.
Like it's
All
not even a
right.
dinosaur bird; it's just a bird.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So we're running a little short on time. I'm not going to talk about epics, but like I think we could skip the epics for now. But there's a lot of really good epics, and they're all really big.
Yeah.
Like you guys,
We have.
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Just name them.
Sure. One, we have the Charged Devilsaur, right? Which is 8 mana, 7/7, which has charge. Unfortunately, it has battle cry, can't attack heroes this turn.
Still, who cares, right? Like it's a
So,
7/7 charge.
yeah, 7/7 charge for 8 mana. That's really
It's
freaking good.
insanely good.
You have Blaze Caller, with God, 7 mana, 6/6 elemental with battle cry. If you played an elemental last turn, deal 5 damage. So Firelance Portal, eat your heart out.
Yeah, but you have to have an elemental at play, and there's not actually that many elementals in this game. So,
Sure.
like mages and shamans, it's kind of insane. Other
Right.
classes, and so all of these cards that Merps is talking about are like about Kraken level or better. Like they're really good cards. Like we made a big deal about those earlier cards and those commons being like better than Kraken. These are too. They're just epic, so you don't see them as often. In fact, we'll talk about this later on in the offering odds ones, but you're actually going to see epics almost exactly at half the rate as you see commons and rares.
Yeah.
Whereas before this in 7.1, it was like zero point 0.7 or something, so you saw a whole ton of epics. So epic rate is actually going down naturally. It's kind of interesting.
And the
Anyway,
last one I
keep
want to
going.
mention was Primordial Drake, 8 mana, 4/8 with taunt and battle cry, deal 2 damage to all other minions. Man, Corrupted Seer just looks really bad compared to this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes out 2 turns earlier though, so there
It
is
does.
that. But yeah, this gets like way more ridiculous stats
Yes.
for just 2 more mana, and it taunts.
And it taunts. And the distribution is really good for a taunt.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of insane.
Yeah. I'm going to add one more card to that. Bittertide Hydra, 5 mana, 8/8. Remember, Fel Reaver's no longer in the meta, so now we have another 5 mana, 8/8. And the drawback here is whenever this minion takes damage, deal 3 damage to your hero.
Hard countered by dude, I can just imagine like a
Avenging
mage
Wrath.
with like the Avenging Wrath or Volcano.
Yes,
Like,
Volcano.
if
yes.
you're facing a
Oh,
shot,
God. This is
Or-
unplayable.
Volcano is I mean it's gonna be highly picked, right?
Yeah.
It's just a quite a good card.
By the way,
So-
Volcano says deal 15 damage to random minions on the board, like one by one.
So it's gonna clear everything, and also you're dead. You're just dead, all right. So hard countered by Volcano here.
Yup.
But it has its drawbacks. It is overstated.
Okay, so there's a lot of really good and fun epics, and like I think epics are in a really good place right now after Ungoro, because if you played in 7.1, you hated seeing an epic in your draft because they're probably crap, and you get offered way too many of them, and they hurt your deck a lot. Like the key reason that average deck values went down very significantly when 7.1 came out is because there were a lot more epics, like a lot more epics, and epics just bring down your draft. So the fact that Blizzard is adding a whole ton of not only just like good arena cards in the epic slots, like a lot. We just named 4 of them, right? There's only like 9 epics total. And some of the other ones aren't bad either. Like there's Gluttonous Ooze, 3 mana, 3/3, destroy the opponent's weapon and gain armor. Like there's like very playable cards. It's really gonna make epics feel a lot more consistent, and you're gonna see less epics. Just like we said before, because the rotation that's going out had 2 sets, which is Blackrock Mountain and League of Explorers, that had a total of 2 epics in the entire set, like both of them combined. So that's why you're gonna see these epics like less frequently. because they're getting rid of, like, the odds just shifted. Anyway, these epics also, they feel epic, right? Like, they're huge monster cards that comes out and, like, wrecks the board, and they cost a lot of mana, but they feel epic when you play them. So I really like this direction with epics. Okay. So before we get to the halfway point of this podcast, let's talk about class cards. And there's too many of them to talk about. We're not going to go, into all of them. That's for the whole video series. But what I want to see is if there are any class cards that are meta-defining. Like, I'm talking about Flame Strikes, Abyssal Enforcers, Murloc Knights, Keeper of Oldemons, Firelance Portals, where the meta becomes known as the Keeper of Oldemon meta, the Firelance Portal meta, the Flame Strike meta of Classic, the Abyssal Enforcer meta of MSG. Like, which cards will fit that category, or could potentially fit that category? And I've come up with a list of traits, right, that a card has, that all these cards have, that makes them fit. So one is it has to be very, very frequently offered. So you have to, like, see it very consistently in offer, and usually one or two of these in each draft guaranteed. So in Ungoro, that would be class spells. So the only things that qualify for it are class spells. Even class minions don't get offered anywhere near at the rate of class spells. So two, it has to have high impact. Like, if it's a one, like, there's a reason all these cards are, like, Keeper of Oldemon is the smallest card at 4 mana, and it's basically a hard removal, which is why it can be small. But they have to be really game-changing when you play it. So even if you have an insanely good card like Potion of Madness for 1 mana, it's not for the Potion of Madness meta. Because at the end of the day, it's still a small effect, even if you're getting a ton of value out of that card. Then, you have to be in a popular class. If we put a meta-defining card in Warrior, it's still not meta-defining because you're not going to see it often enough. So if the card is good, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, because if a card is good enough, like Abyssal Enforcer, it can kind of, like, drag a class up. Like, Warlock was not a top meta class until Abyssal Enforcer and Blast Crystal Potion, right? Like, it had some help. It had a lot of help, actually. Yeah,
and Crystal Weaver, and you need, like, a lot of things.
Yeah, but, so there's a lot of things going on there. But yeah, you need to be a class that gets played a lot. So Paladin and Mage are generally your culprits here. And finally, it either has to have initiative, so you can play it and affect the board, or it has to force your opponent to have initiative, like Murloc Knight, where if your opponent doesn't take care of it, you win the game. Like, that's how you can't just be like a thing, right? If you just put a thing out there, it's too easily removed, and otherwise you just have a thing. So with that in mind, I'm going to cycle through some honorable mentions. All right, what is our first honorable mention, Merps?
All right, so first honorable mention. Like, remember, this is honorable mention. All right,
these have not won.
We have a Grievous Bite. I have to search up this card myself because
what? How did you not, especially considering what card it is, how did you not instantly, like, remember the card? Okay, I'll go. It's a 2 mana Hunter card.
Right.
That says deal 2 damage to a minion and 1 to adjacent ones. So it's a semi-small board clear. It gives you an extra ping onto damage. It's removal for Hunter.
Positioning matters.
Positioning matters. And it's always mattered for Hunter because of Explosive Shot. Now it matters for Grievous Bite. So now this is the only class where positioning matters for 2 cards. And so it's like super high, like, thinking positioning. I'm, of course, not going to think about it at all, as usual.
No, I mean,
so it doesn't change anything for me. But, like, if you do worry about positioning, it's a game changer. Why did it not win? It's a little too small.
Right.
It deals 4 damage at most.
And also, part of what makes this in consideration is we think Hunter is going to be quite good.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, Hunter is going to be quite good. So this is, when we think about meta-defining sort of cards, class cards, you might think it's like, oh, well, I like this card better. And it's not like so much about which card is better.
This is not like a list of the best class cards in Ungoro.
No.
Although these are all very highly rated cards.
Sure. This is what we think are going to shape the meta a little bit more than other cards.
Mm-hmm.
So after
whether
this,
you're playing as the class or against the class.
Right. These are cards that you always have to watch out for. Next, this is I love the design on the card. I'm not saying I love the card.
Oh, I love the card and the design. I love everything about this card.
Spike Ridged Steed. Oh my god, I'm actually quite nervous about this card. Spike
Hmm.
Ridge Seed is a Paladin card, 6 mana spell, which is give a minion +2/+6 and taunt, which we know is quite a good stat distribution, right?
Hmm.
It's what made Power Word Tentacles actually fairly decent. So you for 1 more mana you
Also,
give
Valen's chosen.
yeah, exactly. So it gives a minion +2/+6 and taunt, and when it dies, you summon a Stegodon. And a Stegodon is actually a collectible card. It is a 4 mana 2/6 with taunt. So the value of this is just, oh my gosh, it is off the roof. Like,
Yeah.
off the roof? That doesn't even make sense. I need more sleep. It is really, really big. I can't mess
Hmm.
that up. All right. And the fact that the minion that you buff has initiative and taunt, and the death, I'm going to call it a death
I
rattle,
don't know why
right?
they don't call it a death rattle. Why would they
I
not call it a death rattle? Does it like not trigger death rattle effects? Did
I
they
don't
like
know.
was it so broken with some combo and constructed that they had to say, okay, this is a death rattle, but we can't call it death rattle?
Yeah, I have no idea. But the fact that you get a double taunt, and it's like a very annoying double taunt, so you are almost guaranteed to have something stick on the board and be annoying as a paladin. So good. It's ridiculously good. You are always going to have to watch out for this card on turn 6 and beyond for
Yep.
paladin. Yeah.
It's okay. So why did this card not win? The weakness is its main power is preventable. If you
Yeah.
keep your opponent off the board, it's like Valen's chosen, but the paladin doesn't have a very good curve. So we are in the non-curve stone meta, and if you can just prevent the paladin from having stuff on the board by having it board yourself, which is like still half the time you'll be able to do that at least because the paladin will be slower than you at least half the time. This card is not terribly great in those situations. So
Yep.
it's meta defining in the sense that you definitely need to keep the paladin off the board now. You always did need to keep the paladin off the board, but now it's like even more pressing.
All right. So after that, the next card, and I also just love the design on this card as well. I hate the fact that it's for priest. It's a priest card, free from amber. First of all, I love like the flavor of it, right? It's just so cool. Anyways, free from amber is a priest spell, rare, 8 mana, and you discover a minion that costs 8 or more, and then you summon it. So for 8 mana, you're getting at least something that costs 8 mana, and you get to choose what it is. Now, the
Hmm.
randomness helps a little and hurts as well, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get. You can't exactly plan for it, but you're getting something that costs at least 8 mana,
Which means you're
and
getting a legendary dragon.
which means you're getting a legendary probably, or you're getting like um, a faster ultra sword or something, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Which you're fine with, I think, if you're just paying 8 mana, 8 mana for a 7/14. That's cool. It's just a really cool spell. It goes into a class that really likes playing big stuff, and
Hmm.
Discover is always good, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes you can say, well, I don't need a lot of the stats. I might just need, um, like a King Crush, right? Like I want the King Crush. I don't want actually, I mean, King Crush gives you tons of stats anyways, but it's like I don't need all the stats. I
Right.
want the Charger. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So the problem is that it very rarely has initiative. There are very few cards that are 8 mana or above that have initiative. And that is the case because if you are that big and you have initiative, you are breaking the game somehow usually. So they don't print a lot of those cards. So the weakness is it's still generally just a giant stat stick. And whether it's 8 mana or 10 mana, yes, it makes a difference. Yes, over the course of the game, you'll feel it, but it's not going to be so oppressive that the community is going to like rise up against it. And so now I'm going to present the actual winner of the most annoying card in Ungoro that will define the meta. And it will define it in two ways. One, because the class that it's in is going to be definitely one of the best classes
Oh yeah.
in the Ungoro meta, even though it doesn't have very good class cards in Ungoro. But the meta is just going to be very well suited for it. And two, because it's a card designed to be annoying. And that is Rogue with Envenom.
Oh god. This
So,
card, man.
so remember what meta we're in, right? We're in a meta where things are a bit slower, where you have a lot of taunts, right? And where there's going to be a whole bunch of big stuff too. Like, it's a everything meta, right? It's not curve. In fact, you can think of it as hollowing out the middle. Like, less 4, 5, 6 drops, more 7 plus drops, and more 3 and below drops. So it's more evening out rather than this glut in the middle that we've typically seen with Arena. And so this card is 3 mana, Envenom Weapon. It gives your weapon poisonous. So you're generally going to play it when you have a dagger out, or you play it on turn 5 with the dagger. And it means you get 2 charges of hard removals. You have to take the face damage for it, and you can't re-dagger in the middle. For 5 mana. Is it fair? It's pretty fair. As far as a card goes, right? Because think about like normal weapons. You pay the mana cost. That's how much damage you deal. That's how much face damage you take. This you can think of it as 5 mana. What's 5 mana? Oh, it's a hard removal, right? Like it's assassinate. It's pretty fairly priced. But the thing about it is that it is a hard removal. And the thing about the Ungoro meta is that no other class got a hard removal. This is the only hard removal being added into the game that has initiative, right? Like, you have your stealth poisonous minions and your other poisonous minions. But this is the only true hard removal. And on top of that, rogues... Oh, sorry. There's one more hard removal being added to the game. It's an epic card, and it's also in rogue. So I didn't count it. It's a Vilespine Slayer, which is going to be an insane card. 5 mana, 3/4 combo, destroy a minion. But that's epic, so it's not going to be as oppressive. But if you combine these 2 cards in the same way that, let's say, Warlock had all those cards in MSG combine and, like, you know, build on top of each other, you combine these 2 cards, and then you add Sap, and then you add Assassinate, and then you add Kidnapper. Like, Rogue is an insane array of hard removals now.
Yeah.
In a meta in which the only thing generally stopping you are hard removals. There's not a lot of reach cards being added. There's, you know, if anything, it's anti-reach. There's not that many card draw cards being added. It's just big stuff. And little stuff. And rogues were always good at killing little stuff. And now they're also really good at killing really big stuff. Like, where's the rogue weakness?
I don't know, man. We'll see. Rogue should definitely be a very, very good class in the upcoming meta. So, and they finally responded to sort of Rogue's request for better weapons. Now, I don't know if it satisfies the constructed people, but Envenom Weapon is going to be huge in the arena.
Yep. And in case you're wondering, this is my estimates for the hard removal rates of the classes. Rogue will be number 1 at double the hard removal rate of Warlock and triple the hard removal rate of Mage. I'm not kidding about those numbers. Triple the hard removal rate of Mage.
So, right.
I don't count...
Mage is losing like Polymorph Boar, they're losing Flame Lance, right?
Yep. And they never had that many hard removals.
Right. They do gain...
Warlocks had a lot of hard removals.
They gain Meteor, though.
Yes.
Right.
They do gain Meteor, but it's an epic card. So it's not as prevalent as you think. And then it is 8 times more frequent than anyone else. 8 times. So there are 3 classes that have hard removals in this order, and then everyone else kind of don't, or like literally don't. This is going to be a meta-defining thing. The rogue's hard removal, and more importantly, the fact that no one else has really like significant access to these hard removals.
All right.
Okay, and let's stack one more on top of this. I want to talk about one more card, just one more card, and I want to talk about it because I want to be the first person to say it before it happens. Like, this is really my bold and out there prediction of Ungoro.
Oh God, these always work. I remember what Forbidden
Ancient to 150 back in the old scale.
Yeah, that was
where
also
Dr. Boom
Elemental
was 130
at what?
Oh, Elemental Destruction, that was so good.
You were just ahead of your time. In 7.1, Elemental Destruction is like ridiculous.
Exactly. There we go.
But in that meta, it was not as ridiculous as you predicted. Anyways, just saying, ADWCTA has been wrong, so he's due to be right on this one, right? No, but in all seriousness, go ahead.
The best card in the entire history of Hearthstone
Oh my
for the
god.
arena is Pyros. It is a 2-mana 2/2. It's legendary. Now, before you say, why are you talking about legendaries? I thought you never talk about legendaries, ADWCTA. Legendaries are in the meta now. And not only that, but because Open the Waygate, which is the other legendary card for Mage, is a quest card, and because all the classes have one quest card, that means the legendary rate for the class card is going to be quadrupled along with the bonus. Which means class legendaries, I'm going to repeat this again, class legendaries are going to be offered twice as often as Yetis in Un'Goro. You will see Pyros, if you draft as Mage, you will see Pyros offered to you twice as frequently as Chillwind Yeti.
That's crazy.
Twice as frequently to get a legendary, specifically Pyros, as Chillwind Yeti. That is not a mistake. That is just numbers being run. And shout out.
This is an opinion.
This isn't an opinion. This is just
no,
fact.
this is actually fact.
This is a shout out to Arena Drafts, arenadrafts.com, and ZD Man. He ran the simulations, and that's like with the new cards added in for, because it's just offering rates, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that it's just objective. There's no opinion involved. You don't need a tier list for it. That's the new meta. That's 7.1, and that's the carryover to Un'Goro. Okay. So why is Pyros the best card? So first of all, you're going to see Pyros a lot, and you're going to see all the other class legendaries a lot that are good anyway. But Pyros is the best card ever, and I don't know, because we're recentering, so I don't know what the exact number is going to be, even though I have the number, but it's going to be like, on the current scale, it would be like a 250. On the current scale, where Fiery War Axe is a 200, and like the average card is a 100, this is going to be a 250. And like Deathwing's like a 180 or something like that. But yeah, this is how good Pyros is. It's a 2-mana 2/2, and the Death Rattle is return to your hand as a 6-mana 6/6. And the 6-mana 6/6 has text that says Death Rattle, return this to your hand as a 10-mana 10/10. So, for a card that is incredibly flexible, able to be played, as well as like sort of a 2-drop, but not really, it's also an elemental. And all the cards are elementals. So for a flexible card like that, it has the added bonus of then giving you a 6/6 and a 10/10 worth of card advantage. Which, for that size, if you want to draw in your hand, like if you want to draw cards to match that, would be more than a sprint. Like it would take more than a sprint to get that kind of card advantage. And at each step of the way, when you only have to play it 3 times, you're not losing that much tempo when you play these cards. So think about how good like an Undercity Huckster is. Well, Undercity Huckster is Pyros without the next form and without the guaranteed large card. And think about how good this card is to top deck. You just win the top deck wars.
Yeah. So, okay. ADWCTA basically explained why it was so good. And actually, in all seriousness, I had a conversation with him before this, and he was just like, Pyros is going to be ridiculous. He's like, according to, our system, it's like the best card ever. And I was just like, that doesn't make any sense. But
best card ever.
Right. I mean, when you really think about it. So it's like ADWCTA basically explained to me as like, okay, so it's basically one card drawing you 6, or sorry, not 6. You draw like basically like you draw some very mediocre cards, right? But you draw them in the best way possible. You play it on turn 2, and then you get something back, and you're able to play it again, and you're able to play it again. So you draw it in the best way in which you're playing, and then you draw, you play, and then you draw. And it is just the ultimate value card. And I know, like, you're not very happy, like, you're not like ecstatic about playing a 2/2 on 2. You're not ecstatic about playing a 6/6 on 6. But they're fine. Like, they're absolutely fine.
They're totally normal curve cards.
And we are at a point in which, like, if you're just playing value anyways, like, 10-mana 10/10s, it's not as if, like, the 10-mana cards got better, right? Like, you got your Ultrasaur, whatever. You just get an insane amount of value in a card that actually has potential for early play, and, like, you play it throughout the game. That has a persistent effect throughout the game in which you can keep on playing it. So it is very good. Whether or not like the score is that high, I don't know. Like,
Best card ever.
ADWCTA is the numbers.
Best
man.
card ever.
And we have seen we have seen some interesting evaluations from his end, but no, I mean I think this card is a great example of something in which I see I'm just like, no, it's bad, and then you have to really ask yourself like, what is bad about it? It's like, yes, you don't want a 2/2 on 2, like you're not extremely happy about it, but a 2/2 on 2 with a death rattle of getting a 6-mana 6/6 and a death rattle of getting a 10/10, like it's a lot of mediocreness put into one card, right?
A lot of mediocreness. It's like a super sprint for 2 mana.
Yeah.
Not even for 2 mana, because remember when you play sprint, you lose all the mana, right? You're just like down 7 mana. Here, you lose like half a mana to 1 mana at each step of the way. That's all you lose. So you could think of it as a 3 mana card that gives you like, I don't know, 1.5 sprints.
And value cards, you always lose something. You
like,
always
how crazy
lose.
is that? It's 3 mana for 1.5 sprints. Like, that's an absurd card.
Yeah. And typically you lose, for this amount of value, you typically lose a lot more, right? Like you think about the Gnomish Inventors and the Tomb Spiders, right? You lose a ton of stats. For this, you just lose 1. You know exactly what you're going to get, so there's value there. You know it's going to be big, and it grows along with you in the game. Plus, it's an elemental, which is really good for mage.
Yes. Also the elemental, it gets a lot of value for being a 2 mana elemental, and each of the step is also an elemental. And mages are one of the 2 primary elemental classes with shaman.
So in all seriousness, like I don't know about the exact score, but this is one of those cards where the more I think about them, the more I'm just like, okay, no, I didn't give it a fair shake at the beginning because I sort of separate it out. I'm like, dude, a 2 mana 2/2, I'm not happy with that. Like a 6 mana 6/6, I'm not happy with that. But you do have to remember how you get these cards, when you can play them, and playability is very important, right? And sort of how the meta is shaping. So it is actually a very, very good card.
Yep. Okay, so that's kind of the rundown that we wanted to do. We're like halfway through the list of things we wanted to talk about, but we're just gonna go we're gonna blow through the rest very quickly because we don't want this podcast to be so long. Like, you should really go to our YouTube channel, which is YouTube /GrinningGoat or /ADWCTA. They both work, and starting on Tuesday we'll upload like our deep thoughts on each card individually and all that good stuff, as well as like evaluating like the neutral meta more deeply, the whole meta more deeply, and where each class belongs. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering what website we're using to show you the cards, it's Disguised Toast's new website, disguisedtoast.com. I want to give a shout out to him. He actually got the cards out. I don't know if Blizzard's mad at him for not, but he had like the cards somehow before Blizzard released them. Like, there was a period of time, like 3 or 4 hours on the day in which the card dump happened, where he just, like, his website had the cards and Blizzard's Facebook page did not. It was kind of crazy. But anyway, it's very well formatted as usual, and that's why we're using it. Okay. So let's do a question from the GOAT. Question from the GOAT is brought to you by our patrons, and our March patrons, our top patrons: 4P, Afro Ninja, Famous Wild Goat, Ingo, Talon, and Ugbog. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. It's patreon.com/grinninggoat for anyone else who's thinking about supporting the podcast. And so what is our question from the GOAT?
Question from the GOAT, very simple one. Just sort of what class cards are you looking forward to the most? Like, whether playing, it could even be the voice, you know? Like, flavor-wise, what are you most excited about? I could answer first.
Yeah, you can answer first, yeah.
All right, so this is a card. We haven't talked about it, and it's not because it's not powerful, because it is one of the most powerful cards, but we just haven't really talked about class cards. Crackling Razor Maul. This thing is ridiculously high. I think
this thing only didn't make the list of like meta breaking cards because it's a minion, so you actually won't see it that often compared to spells.
Right, which is kind of sad. But no, like, when you guys will be very happy about its score, if you think highly of this, when we reveal the score tomorrow. Yeah, Crackling Razor Maul is, make sure you're showing it, by the way, 2 mana 3/2 beast for hunters, in which has a battle cry, adapt a friendly beast. This thing is sick. Like, I can't believe they packed so much value into
And
this.
just in case you're wondering, like, a third of the minions, the neutrals that are Ungoro, are beasts because it's dinosaurs. So you have like a
Right.
third elementals, a third beasts, and a third other random stuff or nothing. But there's a lot more beasts coming into this meta.
This thing is so insane because, all right, Blizzard values adapt at about a mana, right? But you did your calculations. It's actually a little bit more than that, right?
It's like it should be like a mana and a half.
Right. But we can't do that. So for Crackling Razor Maw, not only do you have a beast tag, not only do you have the offensively statted distribution that hunters want, you get to adapt to friendly beast, so for like the vanilla stats, you also get like a mana and a half when you get to pull it off, which there's so many beasts in Hunter already, and then we're getting more.
See, I just want people to realize that it's not like as insane as they may think, because most adaptations, I mean, some adaptations work well regardless, right? Like think of like +3 attack or whatever. But the amount of adaptations that are actually like very like highly useful to a 1/1, for example, like Alley Cat into Crackling Razor Maul, is not that high. Like you have to get lucky for that to work.
Right.
What this functions as much better as, and remember, we keep saying this, right? Most 2-drops are played after turn 2, not on turn 2, just because of the number of cards you're going to draw over the course of the game. What this is good at is like on turn whatever, when you play something else with a Crackling Razor Maul, so that even if it's off the board, your other thing's also a beast, and you can just adapt it immediately. You just get that extra value. So again, it's a 2-mana card where its value lies in the future, right? Where you can play it in a control deck and you'd love it just as well. Because if we're valuing adapt at 1.5 mana, this whole thing is like what, like almost a 4-mana card, right? It's like a 3.5 mana card.
Yep.
For only 2 mana, like it's very useful. So it does fit into the whole Ungoro theme of small things that do things later and are good for like control or bigger decks. Yeah, that's a really cool card.
It's pretty ridiculous, and I think this is a card. I think it's one of the top 10 in like overall cards, right? Like
I don't have the exact list, but yeah, it's just really good. It's a premium card.
Yeah, it's a super premium card.
It's a super premium card.
So that's a card I'm looking forward to the most. What about you?
All right, I'm gonna be really boring because I know people are there's actually more exciting cards, but these are the kind of cards I like because they introduce an element of strategy that is not necessarily apparent, and they are functional all the time, no matter what your opponent is, no matter what your deck is. You always want it. Shell Shifter. It is a Druid class card, rare. It's a 4-mana 3/3. Choose one. Transform into a 5/3 with Stealth or a 3/5 with Taunt.
God, you're so boring, dude.
So it's a Senjin,
oh my God.
or it's a Super Panther for 4 mana. They're very normally valued, in a good way, right? They're all good for its value, though not like amazingly premium. But the choice is so different of when you want taunts and when you want stealth. And that introduces just the element of skill in every situation you would ever play it. Like, these are good cards. These are cards we need more of in the meta. And I'm glad, and this is one of the reasons why I like Druid. Like, we're going to talk about this in Class Talk Druid, right? Like, everyone thinks Druid's like one of the worst classes, but it's consistently one of my higher classes, no matter how bad Blizzard makes it, because it's very fundamentals and very skill-based, and if you're a good arena player, and I talk to other good arena players too, they're like, oh yeah, I guess I do better with Druid than I thought I did. It's because you're a good arena player, and if you're good enough at the fundamentals, you're going to just outplay people with this stuff. Because it's all that little... Remember back earlier in the Lightforge when Merps was saying, like, people think about, like, these big game hunter punishes and all this stuff, and they get excited about it, but they don't quite internalize how big of a difference between 3 mana and 2 mana is? People don't internalize how good this choose one is. And it's very hard to internalize. Yeah. Even if you're a good player and you're playing it and you're doing it right, you may not internalize how much it's actually helping you in the game. But this is what makes the big differences, and it's all skill based. So love this card, love the card, want more of it, want to see more of it in Druid, want to see them bring back these choose one things, which is really a very good fundamental core part of playing Druid. I think
it interacts with the board and with your mind.
It interacts with everything. And the thing with choose ones is it's not necessarily broken for constructed. Like, you can make these pretty powerful, because in constructed you're more archetyping, right? So like you have to be very mid-range as the Druid to be able to really take advantage of these choose ones well.
Right. And constructed, the most powerful cards are the ones that interact the most with other cards,
Yeah,
not
the
so much
combo-y
with them
stuff.
themselves.
Exactly. So I love it. This is my boring favorite card of Ungoro. Okay, so that's a question from the goat, and let's wrap this up. We're gonna skip Class Talk Druid. No one cares about the 7.1 meta anymore.
No one cares about it
I gave
anymore.
my spiel about Druid. We'll talk more about it on the Arena Coop. I'm gonna just run really quickly over something I promised from earlier, which is the Ungoro offering odds. And this is courtesy of Arena Drafts and ZD Man, of course. And the offering odds are going to be for spells about... Here's the really interesting thing. So besides the fact that Yetis are going to be offered half as much as class legendaries in Ungoro, which is stupid. But most of these offering odds things are a little bit weird, just because Blizzard has not fine-tuned them yet. Also, rares, all rares, are going to be more common than commons. Of the similarly situated thing. So like a rare minion is gonna be more common than a common minion. A rare spell is gonna be more common than a common spell. That's just how things work because you're changing the number in each pool and you haven't changed the actual pool itself. I'm not gonna go into the technicalities of it, but about 5%. So rare spells are gonna be rare Ungoro spells are gonna be offered like 1.4 per draft. And a common spell will be offered like 1.25 or something like that. But yeah, rares are more common than commons. Commons are more rares than rares. It's not enough for you to really need to think about it because they're still pretty close. But this is what happens when you're like Blizzard and you created the system in a certain way. And so more importantly, the top line offering rate is 1.4 for Ungoro commons. For Ungoro rare spells. And remember, spells are 1.7 times more frequently seen than minions. So it's like 0.8 or something like that for your rare minions in Ungoro set. And your regular class cards. So remember MSG? All the MSG offering bonuses going away. So all your Jades, all your whatevers are somewhere around 0.4 if they're a minion. So class card minions you see about 0.4 of. For non-Ungoro cards, for all the old cards, because now there's nothing special about MSG. It's just like any other expansion. So if you're trying to do some offering odds calculations or trying to figure out what are my odds to get a Jade card or this particular card, those are kind of what you're working off of. And never ever expect to get any neutral commons or rares or epics, just because they're just not in the meta anymore. So that's the offering odds. And anything else we want to talk about before we leave this? Again, like we will go so deep into everything tomorrow night. If you want to watch us live, that's Monday night at our normal stream times at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to run through the entire night for like at least 4 or 5 hours. Or you wait for the YouTube, which is going to come up starting the next day, and we'll start uploading all of them. And you guys should really check that out if you're into like hearing us talk about stuff, because we're going to do it, and we're going to tell you the exact tier list values. We're going to tell you exactly how the tier list is updated, because there's some global changes as well coming in terms of just to make it fit the new Ungoro meta. It's going to be really exciting. I hope you guys check it out. And we will go over, I know if you're watching this on YouTube, it says their deep fried meta, Legacy of 7.1, Curve and Size, Elementals, Adapt. We'll talk about all of those tomorrow, and not actually on the Lightforge. So definitely tune into that. Anything else?
No.
Okay. So that's it. This is our Ungoro preview for the Lightforge. We will continue this on YouTube, and for the next Lightforge, we will already be in the Ungoro meta, so we can update you on how amazing Pyros is. I'm just gonna keep drafting mages just to get Pyros. And in case you're wondering, because I mentioned this, so Pyros is going to be offered once out of every 5 mage drafts on average. Once out of every 5 mage drafts, you will be offered a Pyros. So that means once out of every 10 drafts, you will be offered a Chowan Yeti.
Oh my god! I mean, it is true. I never see Yetis anymore. Yeah.
And the worst part,
never see them.
The worst part is Bloodfin Raptor, because that's the original dinosaur, and you're never gonna see him in the Ungoro meta.
That's so sad. Dinosaurs aren't supposed to go extinct and like they're still here. This is all about dinosaurs, but raptors are dead, man.
Raptors are gone. He's like my elemental destruction prediction. He's just ahead of his time.
Too good.
All right. Well, we're going to do the Arena Coop after this. Thank you guys so much for listening. And again, remember, Pippin our YouTube. Go over to our YouTube starting Tuesday morning. The video should be up if you don't catch us live on Monday night. All the numbers, deep meta analysis of the overall meta, exactly where classes are, class rankings, all the good stuff. See you guys.
Bye.